Hello, this is Scott Montgomery of the Small Town Mercer. Um, this is part two of my video series. Part one was current financing. This is going to be a glimpse of the future, and then I'm going to interject after this is all over with. The first video I'm going to show you is Charles Hodgkinson, the developer of Cardano, and also one of the co-developers of Ethereum. And he's going to basically illustrate the differences between the modern financial system that I just illustrated on my previous video in part one and the crypto financing, a glimpse of it. Then I'm going to play a video. I think it's Ben Shapiro who talks about Bitcoin. And then I'm going to interject when that's over with, and I'm going to start to fill in the gaps about that. So he's going to talk a little bit. I'm going to focus on the government's role in cryptocurrency and where I think it should go. So without further ado, let's get over here to Charles Hodgkinson, the developer of Cardano.
We now have the three big runners, arguably Polkadot, Ethereum, and Cardano. Is there the space for these three to operate together, or in parallel, if you will, or will there only be one winner in this smart contract space? Will there only be Cardano or Polkadot or Ethereum, or will they all coexist?
Well, I've been in the space long enough to watch the top 10 on CoinMarketCap change a lot. I remember Feathercoin and Purecoin and Freycoin and Namecoin and these things. So stuff changes. The only constant is change. So, who knows if it's Polkadot, Ethereum, and Cardano. It does look like we're heading to a Mexican standoff, and, it's going to be a good, the bad, the ugly type of a deal. We don't know which one's wearing a poncho. But we'll find out what happens. The market will decide that. But I think we have the wrong mentality when we look at things in a sub-zero way. At the end of the day, we have to say, are we solving the problems we set out to solve? And there's two sets of them. One are conceptual, and then the other problems are actual. So the conceptual problems are convincing people that you can run governance, you can run systems in a fundamentally different way. Money is a great example of that. We say, okay, two options. You can have private money or public money. Either have a central bank that a government controls or a bank issues a currency. Both of these have screwed the pooch. There's been over 100 plus years of history in modern central banking, and in private banking, we've seen all the way back to the Rothschilds and their gold certificates. In all cases, they just don't work out well. Last year, we printed $6 trillion of money out of thin air to pay for stuff, and they have the audacity to say, I still have to pay taxes. Why? If you're telling me you can print $6 trillion and it's not going to have inflation, why don't you just do that every year and pay for everything? Why not just helicopter money in monetary theory? See, that's the logical inconsistency and the temptation of the printing press. And in private money, look at Tether or these other things. There's a lot of allegations flowing around that maybe they're a fractional reserve. And even if they're not, it's real tempting to be a private business and sit on $25 billion of cash and be like, well, nobody will really know if I take a little bit and maybe invest it in this or do it in that or something like this. What the Rothschilds did with their gold certificates. They say, hey, people aren't redeeming these at the rate of issuance, so we could go fractional. Nobody would even notice, and look how much money we'd make from that seigniorage. Okay, so when you have those types of situations occur, maybe it's better to have a third option. And that's what Bitcoin basically did. It said, this is a deflationary money system, value system. It's like a proto-commodity. It's like digital gold that allows you to build money. And it's not run by a government. It's not run by a bank. It's something new. So that's the conceptual side of cryptocurrencies. And there's all kinds of concepts: voting, property rights, identity, making decisions in a transnational way. And every time you demonstrate a killer use case like that, then everybody can point to it and say, I know that works. And that becomes a permanent social building block that you can use for a business. It's almost like when you're successful, they say, I want to be the Uber of X, the Tesla of Y, right? There's this concept that the business model works, and we want to emulate or replicate this kind of idea. Then the actual is doing stuff, and so success for me in the space is saying, did we make a difference? How did we choose to spend our lives? So I look at the world system, and I did a TED Talk back in 2014. I've just said the same thing over and over and over again. And I'll keep saying it. Maybe one day it'll happen. We live in two worlds. We live in the developed world and the developing world. In the developing world, they're unbanked for the most part. And despite the fact that they're just as smart as us, they work harder than we do, and they're just as human as you and me, they are shafted because their systems are terrible. They live in capital controls and corrupt governments, and they live in areas where there's not good rule of law, and they don't have stable currencies, and as a consequence, no real good banking infrastructure, no good risk management infrastructure, and so forth. So they can't build wealth of no fault of their own. They lost the geographic lottery. They were just unlucky. Okay, so the point of our technology is to take a step back and say, why don't we just give them a new system? We talk about DeFi. Who's going to be using DeFi? The 25-year-old yield farming kid in New Jersey living in his mom and dad's basement? Or is it going to be the farmer in Ethiopia that's trying to get a fertilizer voucher and can actually, if he gets it, afford to repay you a 15% interest rate? It's going to be the farmer. You see, and that's what gets me up in the morning. And I don't really care if that infrastructure runs on Polkadot or Ethereum or Bitcoin. The reason I built Cardano was that I looked at all the infrastructure, I looked at their roadmap, and I realized they're trying to chase the wrong markets, they're dealing in the wrong ponds, and they're not going to really proactively go to that part of the world and help them out. So if we built Cardano the right way, it would be built in a way that would be maximally beneficial to as many people as possible. So yes, the IBMs can use us, and the Microsofts can use us, and the GMs can use us, and we can do supply chain and all of these other things. Sure, but that's not the point. What I'm going to do is wake up and direct our commercial efforts, my company's commercial efforts, to Ethiopia and to the country of Georgia and to Southeast Asia and to Mongolia. But it's an open protocol. So as we do that, everybody else gets to use the protocol for their own use and utility. And what's so cool is you can have a merging of two worlds. So they say, well, it creates use and adoption. Would you like 10 million new customers who are under the age of 30, who are highly digitized, with rapidly growing income, who have no brand preferences? Well, of course. So, okay, come on board, build applications for that, and so forth. So this is the beautiful thing where we each get to touch the elephant in a different way. And maybe somebody gets the tail and somebody gets the tusk. I am looking at it from one particular mission and viewpoint, but to solve that, I've abstracted it and built a generic framework. And I believe what we've constructed can satisfy the demands of billions of people. And as a consequence, I also believe what we've built will, in the long term, be the most competitive platform for all of these use cases.
All right. So anyway, I'm going to stop there. So that's part one of finance. Usability. Has the current, what we'll call fiat system, the system we're using today all over the world, have been using for 100 years, with the invention of Federal Reserve banks or central banks or some sort of a central banking system controlled by the politicians and the banking industry. All right. Has that system solved poverty ever? Have they stopped all wars since 1913? We haven't had any wars, have we? Oh, wait a minute. No, that's not true. Okay, so has this solved poverty? Has socialism solved poverty? Has communism solved poverty? Has this type of capitalism, which is loosely a capitalism, solved poverty? No, it really hasn't. So now we're going to move on to the next phase. Let me get this set up here. There we go. And that's where I think cryptocurrency finance comes in, because whatever money, or let's say grant money, let's see, Charles Hodgkinson mentioned Ethiopia or some Southeast Asian country or even Mongolia. They don't have a lot of capital, but a lot of IMF, World Bank or whatever, don't they loan these countries money? Well, how about if you had an organization went over there a non-governmental organization went over there and actually gave grant money to people to do these things. And they can go on the cryptocurrency system. So now they're prevented from the governments. You don't have to pay them and bribe them off. Now these people can go directly to the marketplaces and get their stuff and make themselves wealthy. And like he said, pay back those interest rates. That's a much better system. Now in this video, this is Ben Shapiro. He's going to talk about the factors of Bitcoin. But I want to come back when he's done and talk about government. So without further ado, I will present Ben here.
You could do transactions with pretty much anyone, and you could do it without having to refer to the dollar. You wouldn't have to worry about central banks. You wouldn't have to worry about governments blowing up the value of the currency. All that a Bitcoin is a belief that other people are going to use the Bitcoin. So, who created Bitcoin? Supposedly, it is this guy right here. Supposedly, his name is Satoshi Nakamoto. Now, the reason I say supposedly is because nobody actually knows who created Bitcoin. And supposedly, it is this guy who's supposed to be 40 and from Japan. That's kind of awesome because you don't want to have a centralized guy who controls all of Bitcoin, some mastermind criminal who actually can inflate Bitcoin at any point and then sell all of his Bitcoin for a bunch of money. You want it to be decentralized. That is the purpose. The basic idea of Bitcoin is that you are concerned that this right here, the full faith and credit of the United States or any government, it doesn't mean anything, right? What if you are worried about that? What if you are worried that the government can simply devalue dollars? Well, then you need to find another repository of value. So what Bitcoin is you believe that the currency is stable enough to be used and enough people are going to accept the currency that it has inherent value. Instead of you relying on the government's ability to tax and the government's ability to stimulate and the government's ability to print and to take out of circulation, instead of relying on all of those powers, you're relying on the idea that there is something that is trusted by enough people that they will use that in the absence of a government. So you're giving up a certain amount of faith in the pure unbridled power of government in favor of faith in other people believing in the same IOU notes that you believe in. This is why some people like Peter Schiff are against pyramid scheme, because just like any other temporary repository of value, people could fall out of love with Bitcoin, and that's true. People could fall out of love with Bitcoin, or they could find a new version of Bitcoin. You see new sort of currencies springing up every so often. So theoretically, you could have people decide, you know what, we don't want to use Bitcoin anymore, or businesses say we're not going to accept Bitcoin as payment anymore, and the value could theoretically go to zero. That is 100% true. It also happens to be the case that Bitcoin cannot be controlled from the outside because governments can make currencies worth zero, but governments don't have the power to make Bitcoin worth zero. That is because Bitcoin is not a centralized currency. It is a decentralized cryptocurrency. So that comes with some costs, and it comes with some benefits. On the cost side, you cannot rely on the ability of Bitcoin to give you some sort of hard asset in exchange for your Bitcoin because that doesn't exist. That's not what Bitcoin is. On the good side of the ledger, you don't have to worry that the creators of Bitcoin are going to simply inflate the value of Bitcoin or deflate the value of Bitcoin by simply printing new Bitcoin. In essence, here is sort of the difference between fiat currency and Bitcoin. Fiat currency is a government, right? Call it the U.S. government. And the U.S. government decides the value of the currency, and then that value is promulgated to all of the other human beings, right? These are all the citizens. All the citizens are out here. Yay, citizen, okay. And then we have an unhappy citizen. So the value of the U.S. dollar is decided by the U.S. government. When it comes to Bitcoin, it is precisely the opposite. Instead, you have a bunch of people out here, and these people have to decide what they think Bitcoin is worth. And because Bitcoin is not an actual government, who's actually creating the value of Bitcoin, instead, you have all of these people investing their own assets into Bitcoin. So the definition of value is incredibly different. The definition of value is coming from the outside in as opposed to from the inside out. There are some who say that Bitcoin is worthless. It's not valuable. But then there are others who say that you can trade Bitcoin for something truly incredible. Like these Raycons, the greatest of all wireless earbuds.
All right. Glad we got to a commercial. All right, there's two things. Let me turn this around. Two things I want to discuss. Number one, and here's my viewpoint that's different from anybody else you're going to hear in the crypto world. Because I don't think Anybody's thought about this yet. I have thought about it. I've thought about it for almost a year now. All right. Government creating currency is more stable than the voodoo of Bitcoin, who's created by some machine-driven algorithm or something. Okay? As the video mentioned, how's that working out? All right. In reality, the government can work with Bitcoin. It doesn't have to be threatened by it. I know one thing would happen if governments did work with cryptocurrency, Bitcoin in particular, or a number of cryptocurrencies, or just a handful of them. All right, their power would be limited, and they wouldn't be able to be in charge of the money supply. Well, guess what our Constitution says? That the people are supposed to be in control of the government, and the Congress, which is the most numerous portion of our government, is the one in charge of money, or in charge of currency, or whatever you want to call it. I want to have money in place of currency. And so cryptocurrency is considered a voodoo economic system because it's on the internet. Well, like I've said in previous videos, isn't the dollar bill on the internet? Yeah. I mean, do you pay with physical money? Do you have a bag of money you go around and go to the store and pay here and go shopping and pay there, go buy your shoes and clothes and pay there with your big bag of money? Today? No, I don't think you do. I think you whip out a card or write a check or something. Okay, what's the difference? I don't see any difference. I mean, if you're going to use a computerized system and they're going to look at your check and go verify it with some verification system, let me tell you something. Your Bitcoin transaction, the minute you go to pay with it, the money's already there. That's there. It's there. It's not digital bank money that hasn't been tabulated. It's your transactions go just like that. The minute you pay for something, it's gone. All right? You just have to agree to it. And that's all there is. There isn't anything else. So, you know, like I have proposed, I don't really think you need to tax people. What I think citizens of countries should do is when they have some means, pay taxes. You don't have to pay them with your coin. You can borrow it and loan it using another currency. And loan it to the government, and the government can pay you back in interest. You could do this every year. They don't have to pay you back in 1 year, but they certainly, in this rate, would have to live under their means if they had to pay it back, right? And then they'd have to come up with a serious budget that will make, will profit the people who are using it, not some dream garbage of programs that help lobbyists or sound good, but will never generate any money. And I'm going to use the perfect, I think, case study for that. I'm going to use the energy sector and the green energy in particular. So that's what I'm going to use in my next few videos. But the other thing I wanted to mention is that, so I want to debunk that myth. The government can use our money, and they can live within their means if we are the bank and we loan them the money. That's how it should work instead of the Federal Reserve and the Treasury doing it. We could still have a U.S. Treasury, but you don't need an IRS or Federal Reserve. All right? The second thing I want to address is people still want to value money based on the dollar bill. That's why you have these stable coins, like Tether was mentioned in the previous video. And then they could be fractionalized because they're tied to the dollar. Well, guess what? The dollar is fractionalized. Of course, stable coins can be fractionalized. Why would you want to use the stable coin for that reason anyway? Why don't you tie a stable coin to Bitcoin, a value? It doesn't have to be one-to-one, but, if you want to use Tether or DAI or one of these stable coins, I don't have a problem with that. Just don't tie it to the dollar. Tie it to Bitcoin. Say it's worth one 1/50th of a Bitcoin or something, and leave it at that. Then you have a real stable coin. That's the kind of money we can spend. And if there's a finite amount, maybe you only produce 1% a year, kind of like gold, or 2%, then you have some stability. That's what I think should happen. I think something like Ethereum or a Tether or a DAI or US dollar coin, whatever the stable coins are, or some other, Cardano even, some other currency, tie it to the value of Bitcoin. Don't tie it to the value of the dollar. I mean, why wouldn't it be fractionalized in that case? And those are the points I wanted to make today. Let me write that down. All right. So that's it for today. Those are the big points I wanted to make. So I thank you for watching. This has been Scott Montgomery of the Small Town Mercer. We will see you in my next video, and have a good day.